So we are so excited. We are here to finally give our thoughts and talk about Star Wars The Last Jedi and everything. It's been a little crazy, and it's kind of a movie that you want to stew on a little bit and think about a little bit, I think. And so Abby and Jeremy, my Star Wars buddies, are here, and we are going to talk about it. And if you're new to the podcast, it was the very first podcast I ever did that we reviewed leading up to The Force Awakens, all of the Star Wars films, and it talked about them. And then we did Rogue One, we did Force Awakens, we did Rogue One, and now we're doing this. So we have a bunch. I'll put a link down to the playlist. You can listen to all of the analysis that we've done over the years. It's crazy. It's been a long time. The thing I want to talk about is just sort of before we dive into the plot, and this will be a spoiler heavy podcast. Hopefully everybody's seen it, but if you haven't seen it, then stop listening and go see it and then listen because we will be revealing spoilers. And so the first thing I want to do is just talk about sort of your overall response, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. I walked out of the movie the first time I saw it kind of mixed on it. Like, I liked it. I was entertained. But there were some things that I didn't like and that I wouldn't have done. And overall, I did feel like it was a little bit too long. I was a little, I know there's just some things I didn't love it like I wanted to love it, and that I loved The Force Awakens, but I was entertained enough. Again today for the second time, and I pretty much feel the same way. I have issues, and we'll dive into some of those things that I didn't love, but overall, it's fine. I don't love it, but it's fine. It's certainly not the worst Star Wars movie, and I think I was helped a little bit by the fact that I didn't like Rogue One very much. Like, I was pretty disappointed in Rogue One. And so for this one, like,
your hopes weren't too high for it.
Yeah. And so anyway, we'll go into some of the things that I didn't love. But there was a lot that I did like, especially Kylo and Rey. I loved them.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, especially on the first watch. I will say there were definitely some moments of drag.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I walk into a Star Wars movie and see it for the first time, I shouldn't ever want to look down at my watch or my phone and see what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of times when I did that.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I wanted to. I don't know if I actually did or not. But, like, that's just a bad sign when you're thinking about how long has this been so far and how long is left.
Mm-hmm.
But there were definitely some moments that made me cheer.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked Mark Hamill in this, and I liked Luke.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, yeah, I was entertained by it. I enjoyed it. Is it a perfect movie? No. I'd say it's pretty middle of the pack for me as far as, like, the Star Wars movies go.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, you are allowed in this day and age to have a middle-of-the-road opinion. People act like you're not. You have to either, like, hate it, it's the worst thing ever, or it's, like, the greatest thing.
Yeah. You're either a total fanboy or you're a troll and you hate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I was really apprehensive about spoilers with this, as I was with, have been with any Star Wars movie. But I did watch all the trailers, the official trailers, and the one thing that people who saw it before I did, they were like, in the trailer when Luke says this is not going to go the way you think, that really sums up the movie. That was kind of my first takeaway walking out of it was, wow, like, I'm not sure what I just saw, but I did have the takeaway, like, it was awesome. I really enjoyed it, but it's not anything, from the moment Luke flips the lightsaber over the edge of the cliff, I'm just like, oh, this is, I don't know what's going on here, but I actually really enjoyed most of the ride. I did think Act 2 especially the Canto Bight, was too long and drug too far for me. But overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the surprises and the mystery and just the I thought it was actually kind of a neat response to the people who really didn't like Force Awakens, because they said it was just a reproduction of all these Star Wars tropes. And now here's one that kind of takes Star Wars and sets it on its ear, and now you have everybody upset that it's not Star Wars enough. So I thought it was kind of interesting, those two. But overall, I really liked it. It does have its flaws, but I enjoyed the movie.
Cool. Yeah. So we all enjoyed it to some level or another. One of the things that I walked out of it saying is that I feel like with Last Jedi, that Star Wars has 100% embraced fantasy. There used to be like a debate between, is it sci-fi, is it fantasy, is it sci-fi fantasy? And in my opinion, The Last Jedi is fantasy, like all fantasy. And there were just so many things about it that to me just seemed, in the world building and the mythos and the way that they've decided to embrace the Force and some of the other things, that to me this is very similar to, like, I don't know, to your like fantasy franchises.
I never thought it wasn't fantasy. Like, I feel like it was 100% fantasy from the very first episode.
Yeah.
Or from episode 4, which was the very first movie.
See, I always felt like it was sort of a space adventure, and so I guess in that sense it sort of seemed sci-fi to me, with the aliens and with the, like, I like Star Wars the best when it's like a pulpy space adventure, when you were like cheering and like, and that's why New Hope was always my favorite for forever, the original Star Wars, because it's just it's this kind of it's like a Western, but it's in space. And that's the same with Force Awakens, is the same as far as that feel, just like a pulpy space adventure. And that's what I like the best. And so when it gets into sort of this more like mythos and like this more sort of fantasy feel of it, it starts to lose me a little bit. But I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I've always, ever since I was a little girl, struggled with really, really strong fantasy. Things like, it took me a long time to warm up to Lord of the Rings. Things like that is just hard for me to relate to. And I don't know. What do you think about that, Jeremy?
I guess I can see where you're coming from. I never really thought about it. It is delving into new ways to look at the Force and new Force abilities that we really hadn't seen, at least in the movies. And I kind of, I get what you're saying, and I see, there is kind of that, is it the sci-fi to fantasy spectrum? I really don't have a problem with where it's going, but I have been exposed to a lot more of the universe, I guess, through some of the video games. I played the Knights of the Old Republic games, had a lot of, there were probably 30 or so Force powers that you could get in those games. And so there's just a kind of a wide range out there. And so maybe it just prepared me to be a little more open for that kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So we get the start of this movie. You have Poe is leading this group of the Resistance, attacking the First Order, and he decides that he wants to take down this dreadnought, but Leia tells him not to, and to go and to come back. But he decides to go ahead and do this, and they end up losing all of their bombers in this, but they do take out the dreadnought. And so Poe gets demoted by Leia. You have this interchange between the two of them. And how did you feel about that, Abby?
Well, I thought that worked. Like, I actually thought it was interesting and different. to
Mhm.
bring down a notch the cocky hero type.
Mhm.
And
I agree with you. I think that it was an interesting. I don't think we've seen. Maybe you could claim that Anakin was sort of scolded in that way by
mhm.
Obi-Wan, but other than that, I can't really think of an example that was similar to this.
Yeah, it's sort of a dynamic we haven't seen a lot.
Mhm.
And I appreciated that it was different, and that instead of, just having this one note of, oh, hail the conquering hero, we see a little bit more realistic view of it. Um, sometimes doing the thing that looks most heroic isn't the right choice.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I don't really want to admit how many hours of reading and watching YouTube videos I have done regarding this movie, but I've I've learned a lot about what Rian Johnson and his team were trying to do. And one thing they did going into the writing was they wanted to look at every main character and try to find what would be the hardest thing for them to deal with. And so looking at Poe specifically, it's that idea like he is the ultimate cowboy and flyboy, and he's great at what he does, but that's not, I mean, he had to learn, the ability to restrain that and to follow leaderships and to become a leader, because that just being great at a great pilot and a great fighter isn't the only part of leadership. And so having him go up against Leia and kind of the established leadership, this really did knock him down a peg, and he had this huge lesson to learn from it. I really enjoyed that growth, but then
Mhm.
they kind of did a similar thing for each character. And as we go
Mhm.
through, I'm sure we'll touch on that, but I really appreciated how much each character had to kind of struggle in this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll be curious to hear more of that. So the First Order ends up attacking the bridge of the ship, and Leia ends up getting sucked into space, and and she uses the Force to draw herself back to the ship. And I was not a fan of this both times. I thought it looked really cheesy. I thought it was dumb. And yeah, I get it. Leia's like super awesome. Like I love her, but like I don't know, I just thought it looked dumb. And like to me, uh the Force is more interesting when it's something that's similar to something that's a spiritual power rather than a superpower. And I feel like in the original movies, it was more, this is just my interpretation. It was, I always thought as more of sort of a priesthood, the kind of power in in the Bible that Moses is parting the Red Sea and things like that, like a power that you had to have that calling, and you had to be a Jedi, and you had to learn how to use it and all this stuff. And so for Leia, who's amazing, for the Force to all of a sudden allow her to breathe in space, to bring herself back to pull herself back. um I just, I don't know, I just didn't like it. And maybe I would have liked it if it had been done more convincingly and I didn't think it looked so silly, maybe, but I didn't like it.
I think you're reading more into how much force she was using there
Hmm.
than they intended, maybe?
That
Because
could
I
be.
didn't get from it that she was breathing in space at all.
But how could
I
she
just got from it
survive
that
in a vacuum? You die if you're in space without a helmet.
I agree with that, but she wasn't necessarily breathing. Like, you don't die the instant you stop breathing.
So she was like holding her
Um,
breath that whole time, you think?
well, yeah, I think that would make sense. You can live without oxygen for a minute or two. Um,
Because like,
but I just think it was stupid because, like, I don't think she was using the force to keep herself alive.
hmm
I think they just did a crappy job of depicting what happens to a person in space.
That could be fair. It could be fair. I'd be willing to go there.
So I don't see the Force as any more a superpower with her than it was with Luke or with Rey.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they both did Force stuff before they really had the training.
Mm-hmm.
And
fair.
we've
Fair.
seen previously that Leia does have the Force. Like, that's been evident since early on.
We've seen that she's certainly Force sensitive as far as intuition and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never seen her actually like in battle or using the Force in some way.
It was pretty clear though that she was Force sensitive, and there's no reason that someone who's Force sensitive can't use that. You know, I actually appreciated that they gave her a moment of using the Force.
Mm-hmm.
I just think the way they did it was kind of dumb.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. I will concede the point on that. I'll do that. Like, I think that the other problem that I have with the scene is that it basically incapacitates her for a large section of this movie, and you get General Admiral Holdo, who I didn't like, and I felt like she had all these moments that I wish Leia had had.
I agree.
And so that was frustrating to me that, you know, she should have been the one having these conversations with Poe Dameron. She should have been the one making these choices, especially when it's dealing with her son like that. And so I thought that was a really strange choice. And I honestly, I thought that Holdo's dialogue was kind of prequelish. I thought it was sort of clunky and just not great. And Lara Dern's a good actor, but I don't know. So that was the other sort of problem attached with this whole situation.
Yeah, I agree on a lot of what you guys are saying. I don't mind that Leia was able to utilize the Force in this time of need. We're going to cross universes here, but I kind of liken it to, Harry Potter. When Hagrid's telling him he's a wizard, and he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, haven't you ever made anything happen that you didn't mean to? So I just kind of see it like that, like, she's got this power, and in this moment of need, she was able to harness it. And it's not trained, but it was just kind of a very basic, and you're out in space, you don't need much force to get anything to move. But then the Holdo thing, I think it comes back to what Poe had to learn. And you saw in the scene when they're announcing that Leia is incapacitated and they're about to announce who's going to replace her as leader, the camera's on Poe, and he is just ready to stand up and say, yep, it's me, thank you, I'll lead us to victory. And then they announce it's Holdo. And I believe that it was written this way, and it went to Holdo because it was Poe's struggle in this was, yes, he defied Leia directly in the opening scene, but he wouldn't have maintained that. Like, once he's back in the room with her, it's Princess Leia. But he would absolutely mutiny against Holdo. And I think that was the whole reason, like, that was part of his arc and why they wrote Leia out of the middle.
I guess that makes sense, but I would still way rather have more Leia than some other random lady that we only get to see briefly.
Yeah, agreed. I can see the point, but I agree. So do you agree with Holdo's strategy, though? Like, of just sort of waiting and waiting and waiting, and I was sort of frustrated with her. I'm like, what's your plan? Like, when Poe's like, what's your plan? I'm like, yes, what's your plan? Like, you're just waiting for the gas to run out, I guess. Like, I didn't understand what she was trying to do.
Well, I think they tried to, it's just kind of a contrivance there where she could have just told, they could have just shared, yes, there's an old rebel base that we're trying to get to, and we'll use the escape pods cloaked, to get there without them noticing. Like, they could have shared that with everybody at the beginning, and then there wouldn't have been this kind of fake thing like there's no plan. So I really felt like it really just came down to not sharing it, and I don't know why they chose to do that, whether the writers or Holdo herself.
Yeah, because it forces Poe to to create this second plan with Finn and BB-8 and Rose to go to this planet that Maz Kanata tells them to find this code hacker, that because their goal is to their plan is to try to take down the tracker that's in one of the ships long enough so that they can leave without being noticed by the First Order. So they go down, and what did you think of Rose, Finn and Rose, first of all, and what did you think of this plan?
Okay, so I really liked Finn and Rose at first.
Mm-hmm.
And they got really old really fast.
Yeah.
This movie, so I do want to mention, like, some of the feminism in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite Finn and Rose moment is this really it's sort of a subtle feminist moment where Finn is explaining the plan to Poe, and Rose is right there. And she tries to, take over explaining at some point, and she kind of gets shut down. The guys talk over her, and then she powers through and speaks up and, takes control of the conversation from Finn, which I thought was kind of awesome. But then there were other parts of the movie that I felt like they were just trying to hit us over the head with feminism.
Yeah, not
like,
even just
the female general is being replaced by another female general who also has purple hair because she's the lady. Feminism.
Well, not even just feminism, but other social issues too. Like like the animal rights kind of thing felt really weird. Like that's never been. I guess you could maybe make an argument. There's been some of that in the prequels, but it was more sort of like broad social messaging, not like a specific issue like that. That was weird.
Yeah, that's true.
That was really weird. And so, yeah. And it seems like, I guess, I don't know. It seems like surely Maz could have given them more information about this guy. And help them a little bit more,
Right.
I mean, and how the heck would she know that he has like a pin
thing on his lapel?
Yeah. That's pretty. I mean, she can't tell him the name.
Do you know what when Maz Kanata's like giving them instructions?
Yeah.
It feels like a video game. When you're like in one of these adventure video games, when there's a video that gives you the instruction for your next quest. That's what it felt like.
It's true. That's a good point. It sort of did feel like in the recent Jumanji movie that you'd have these characters and they could literally only say like 2 lines because that was their line in the game. And they kept trying to ask them more questions. They'd be like, so you like monkeys or whatever. I don't know. They had like 1 line that they could say.
That's funny.
Yeah. The favorite thing about the whole Rose and Finn thing was the kids and that whole kid thing. I thought that was really cool, really sweet, and like kind of got back to sort of the heart of Star Wars is inspiring children. I really liked that part of this movie and sort of that part of this plot line. I thought was good.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't have a problem with Finn and Rose. Actually, they kind of grew on me as they went, but again, the Canto Bight went way too long, and I don't know what you do with that. But I also heard that the initial script was for Poe and Finn to do that mission, and I kind of wonder if I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. They might have avoided some of the other social issues, the animal rights thing that felt a little shoehorned in, and but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't mind Finn and Rose, and I liked Rose's thing at the end. That the message when she stopped him from doing the self-sacrifice, and I did like their arc together.
Yeah, I thought that when I first saw it, I thought that she died at the end. But I guess the second time I was like, oh, I guess she's not dead. Okay.
So I hope she's not dead, because otherwise they would have spent a whole lot of time on her
right.
for a whole lot of nothing. Like, we need some payout on this character, because too much time was invested in her in this movie if she's just going to die.
Because really her only role is to, like, kind of be the cheerleader for Finn, like, in this, like, you know, to get him to stop making stupid choices is her role, which isn't really that empowering when you think about it.
It's really not. And, you know, it's just frustrating because, like you said, if they had just disclosed the plan to go to this other planet, this whole conflict and line in the movie would have dissolved. And if they had two conflicts in this movie that leaned entirely on the fact that, I don't remember the name of what's-her-face's character, the purple-haired lady. Holdo. If Holdo, like, you can't have two major conflicts in the movie leaning on the fact that Holdo won't open her mouth and tell people what the plan is for no good reason.
Right.
Like, that's just too weak.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. So, okay. So at the same time all this is happening, we have Rey and Chewbacca, R2-D2, are on at this, they're on Octu, this island, and they've come to recruit Luke. That's what we, you know, saw at the end of Force Awakens. And a lot of people, I think, were upset about this movie because it did sort of, like, it cut off a lot of the sort of mystery and the other things that from Force Awakens in really weird ways. And I'm not saying I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely, like, it was definitely really surprising the choices that they made with the sort of the questions of Force Awakens. And so I know you said you liked Luke a lot. I'm mixed on Luke. When I first saw it, I said in my review that I said Luke is a confusing character in this film. Much like Saw Gerrera in Rogue One, I felt the screenplay couldn't quite decide if he was a monster or a hero. It swung a lot, which was more frustrating than intriguing. Mark Hamill is up for the challenge of the role and does a great job, but it was confusing. So that's kind of how I felt. And on a second viewing, I guess, like, the thing for me is that you can say that, yes, he has been changed through all the events of his life, but, like, I kind of feel like people don't change that much. Like, if I go home and, like, I'm hanging out with my friends from high school, we're gonna click and be basically the same, even though we've had all these different experiences. Like, we're still the same people. And the core of who Luke was somebody who was loyal to his friends above all. And he saw the good in even Darth Vader. And he fought for that. And so the idea that Luke Skywalker would hide himself away from all his friends and that he would even contemplate killing Ben Solo, to me, was very hard to believe.
I don't know. I didn't find that hard to buy at all. 'Cause I don't know, think about what he's been through. So, like, you compare, like, okay, if I went to my high school reunion and saw my friends from high school, but, like, what if you add another, 10 or 15 years and add some, like, really significant trauma to that? You might not be as recognizable in your personality as you think. Like, trauma does crazy things to people. It really can completely change their personality. And it can change, I mean, like, it just makes a really big difference whether what experiences you've had in those years makes a bigger difference. It's not the same as, like, oh yeah, well, I had a baby and I, had my career and, I lost some people that I loved and made some new friends and whatever. That's
Mhm.
normal life stuff.
So what
And
did
that's
you?
95% of what you and your friends would have experienced.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, what did you like about this version of Luke? What drew you to it?
I liked that he was snarky.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that. And I also liked that, like, I didn't see him like Saw Gerrera, where he was just like swinging from hero to crazy man all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I saw it as like he was really had some complex inner conflict going on. Because there is that part of him that's super loyal and wants to see the good, but he's been totally, it's like he was disillusioned. It's like he totally lost um, his spark
Mm-hmm.
for being a Jedi.
What do you think, Jeremy?
Well, I do. I'll echo the I feel like this is Mark Hamill's best representation of Luke. Just it was an amazing performance. I So overall, where is Luke right now? He I actually do buy it. I buy that he shuts himself off from the Force, that he has intentionally secluded himself, because he's uh kind of, I don't know, all or nothing, and he put his entire heart into this. Once he decided to commit and went with Obi-Wan, from Tatooine in the beginning, he was all in. And he bought into it. And then when that was all over, he trains a whole new generation of Jedi because that's the right thing to do. And I think Luke's, that was his mantra, was, it's the right thing to do, I'm gonna do it. And yes, there's good in him, I'm gonna save him. And he lived like that. And then you have the everything falls apart and crumbles. His most gifted student is so full of the dark side that it terrifies him and he panics. And then the whole thing is crumbled and falls, and he has no idea what to do, except that now he's completely lost his nephew. He does, and he comes to this realization that if there were no Jedi, then the Sith wouldn't rise, the evil wouldn't be there, and then if he hadn't trained anyone, Kylo would not have, become, Ben wouldn't have become Kylo. And I think he just sees that, if, again, as Snoke had said, darkness rises and light to meet it, or the opposite, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, well, if we take away the one, then the other is going to have no reason to rise either. And he just completely shuts out and feels like that's the right thing to do now. And so I get it, and I see it as a progression of that person who has gone through this loss and suffering, and sees that it's all because he tried to resurrect this and build a temple and have students, and that's why there's so much darkness in the galaxy. I think he blames himself for Kylo, he blames himself for the First Order, for Snoke being so powerful right now. He blames himself for all of it, and he felt like the only way to make it right was to get out and get away and have no more part of it.
Mm-hmm. Is it surprising that it seemed like this was the first time that Yoda had visited him? To me, did it feel that way to you? Because it seemed like he would be getting visitors all the time by like Anakin and by Obi-Wan, and trying to kind of help him through this. Yes, no.
I,
Well,
I assumed it was because he was like shutting himself off to the Force.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would have had to have been like not shutting it out to be able to even have that happen, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
yeah, I would agree. I would think it would be maybe back when he had the temple and he's training his students, that he may have had more of that
Mm-hmm.
kind of back and forth discourse with kind of the Force ghosts. But I think once he decided to shut himself off completely, he may have been unreachable. And I don't know, what that's like. Of course, can a force ghost just appear to somebody who doesn't have a connection or doesn't want that connection? Maybe he could even had some way to block it. But it did seem like it was definitely the first time, if he was conversing with Yoda back when he had a temple of his own and his academy. I don't think he had any connection prior to that on Octu.
Interesting. Okay. So let's get to my favorite part of this movie by far. So Rey starts this training and she starts having these moments with Kylo Ren. And if you had told me that my favorite thing about the movie would be Kylo Ren and Rey before I saw it, I would have said you were crazy. Been like, no, Rey can't have this with Kylo, but like he killed Han Solo. How could that be? But it was so good to me. I thought they had such chemistry. I thought it was just like palpable. It was hot. It was very, very good. And I just thought I'm so intrigued to see where it goes next, because the episodes have always been about the Skywalker family. And I know they've sort of stepped a little bit away from that, but I would be pretty bummed out if the final in this series of 6 episodes, if it ends with the last remaining Skywalker being the supreme high ruler, evil, whatever they call him. I would be pretty annoyed by that. And so I feel like all of this connection between Rey and Kylo, something's going to happen in this next one with the two of them. I don't think that's done. I don't think that's over.
And I hope you're right.
Yeah. What you guys? Did you like that as much as I did, or did you enjoy that?
I'm not a huge fan of Reylo.
Okay.
I didn't mind. I don't mind the connection and kind of experimenting with that bit of the Force. I just don't see them together. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's not like a couple thing, but in the end, I'd actually be okay with the Skywalker line and ending badly. I'm okay with that. What I think the direction they're going is that like they show the little boy at the end of the movie and kind of implying that the Force is going to raise up kids and new, like this new generation. There's always going to be more Force sensitive kids who are going to kind of find their way to that light and fight for what's right, because they're going to be inspired by the legend of Luke, and they're going to be inspired by Rey. And but I actually see Rey as the first, and this is all my conjecture at this point. I think Kylo was absolutely right, and she really is the daughter of nobodies, and she's kind of that first example of the Force, like the Force Awakens. Okay, it's awakening, and it's actually kind of awakening in kind of a new generation who are not tied to the Skywalkers, and it's just to show that the Force will raise up who it needs to create the balance that it needs. And that's kind of the direction I see it going, and I'm kind of okay, like I said, if it ends up being that Kylo stays evil and ends up just getting taken down by Rey and like this newer generation moving on.
Interesting.
I agree that I don't care if the Kylo Rey thing turns romantic at all. I do want to see more of the two of them, because I think that connection was just really cool. And I think it's a much more I think these movies deal much more in the gray areas in between light and dark, in between right and wrong and good and bad. Where, when you watch the episodes 4 through 6, it's very clear, there's right and there's wrong. And it's almost like fairy tale-ish in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it feels like the complexity is growing up with the audience, and Rey is drawn toward the dark, and Kylo is drawn toward the light, and they're kind of
that's what's interesting.
Yeah,
I agree. I just think it would be such a cool thing. I mean, if you think about episode 1, starting out with Anakin becoming, and then going into him becoming Darth Vader, and then like to end this whole thing, the whole Skywalker saga, to end with Kylo Ren becoming redeemed at the end. I think that would be so, like, it would just like make everything fit and work, and it would be really cool to me. And I just thought they had such chemistry, and it was so good to me. I just loved it. All those scenes that they were together, whether it was they were actually physically together or whether they were like spiritually together or whatever.
Right. Force projecting themselves or whatever.
That completely worked for me. I loved it.
I really did appreciate was that Rey ended up in the movie having the same opportunity that Luke did, where Luke sensed the darkened Kylo and had an opportunity to kill him. Rey woke up first after their battle, and so presumably she could have just killed Kylo before he woke up and been done with him, but instead she just leaves, and so we didn't see that on screen, but she had to have this moment where I could really, I could rid the world of this evil. I know he's choosing dark, and he just wants to take over, but she didn't.
Do you think that there's a chance that Kylo is an unreliable narrator as far as her parents?
I think that chance exists, but we actually discussed this right after seeing it, like within the next day or so. Because people were like, "Oh, it's settled. Rey's nobody," and I was like, "Well, Kylo Ren is kind of a big fat liar. Like, he had his own interests there. He wasn't necessarily telling the truth." But we agree, I think, didn't we, Jeremy, that we're pretty sure that's probably the case.
And I kind of hope that, yes, he could be an unreliable narrator, but I kind of hope he's right. Because again, I think it almost diminishes Rey if we find out that she does have, it's like, oh, is she a Palpatine? Is she a Kenobi? I don't think you need that. And I really feel that especially with this movie framing it, that's the direction it's going, is you don't have to be part of any particular bloodline or lineage if the Force can be strong in you, if it's the will of the Force that you you kind of rise up to that role, and it's almost, again, you mentioned priesthood, like the Bible, it's almost like a calling, that you can fulfill this, and it doesn't matter who your parents were.
Yeah, it just seems like a little late in the game to me. I would be disappointed, for me, if we end up with the Skywalkers being bad. That would be very disappointing to me. But I can see your point too. So we'll just have to see how it's executed. I have a ton of faith in JJ. I'm not one of those people that was like, oh, why did they pick JJ Abrams? And that was so funny to me, because when they picked JJ Abrams to the next one, there were all these people who were like, why didn't you pick Rian Johnson? He's the greatest, And then, of course, as soon as they see the movie, they're like, what? JJ Abrams doesn't look too bad, huh? Right?
Right. So, to me, The Force Awakens hit just the right balance of drawing in themes and things from the old, with creating a new aesthetic and a new story and new characters that we love.
Right.
This one, I felt like definitely, and that was probably the biggest criticism of Force Awakens, was it's too much like the old ones.
Yeah, you did hear that a lot.
this movie goes farther away. And I think on the whole, we can all agree it's a lot less good.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this third one will draw back in that redemption theme.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's kind of the whole point of the whole episodes 4 through 6. That's the whole point of even episodes 1 through 6. That's the whole point.
Right.
Is that there's always hope, there's always redemption. You can always turn around and become the good, you know. And so I'm really hoping we see that theme in one form or another in the next movie. I don't know if I care whether or not that comes through the Skywalkers. That seems the most likely place for it to come. But I want to see it. I want it to be there.
Did you feel it wasn't there in this movie?
The hope?
No, the theme of redemption.
No, it wasn't. But like, if you look at episodes 4 through 6, you don't see that theme of redemption until the end. And then you realize, oh, that's like the theme of the entire trilogy.
I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a little bit with sort of the ending with Luke. You could take that way. But I don't know. It wasn't quite... It didn't quite do it for me just because I had been so sort of not in love with his portrayal, I guess. Maybe is part of it. But they tried to do a little bit. But I agree with you that I think that JJ is the perfect guy to kind of put this whole package together again. I mean, it's tough. Like, he's got a very hard job ahead of him. But I think he's up for the task. I trust him. I think he's going to do a good job. They finally find the code track or whatever. And it ends up being Benicio del Toro. And that ended up being, I thought, a complete waste. I don't know why they had... He's an Oscar-winning actor. Why the heck do you need... Like, I thought that he was going to do a whole lot more. And I don't know. Like, I feel like there's going to be additional scenes on the Blu-ray or something like that with him. Because, yeah, that was weird, I thought. And, but anyway, he ends up being a crook. And then you have Phasma fighting Finn, and BB-8 driving the AT-AT thing. And I don't know, like I this is where I think Star Wars fans can be really stupid, because I've heard people criticize Phasma. Oh, she's so poorly used, whatever. And I'm not saying she's not poorly used, but how do people put Boba Fett on some kind of pedestal? They want a whole Boba Fett movie to be made, and you're going to tell me that he's that much better than Phasma? Come on. And so they elevate everything in those original movies as if it's perfect, and like the dialogue is perfect, and all the special effects are perfect, and blah 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 are all perfect, and it's not perfect. Like, the acting's not that great. I mean, I love those movies, but I feel like I don't know. Like, I feel like I love them honestly.
Well, I feel like I think that a lot of the problem is these people who are criticizing it, our age demographic, like, is the demographic for this movie. Right. If we're being honest. Like, right. This is for us. But we have the original movies completely tainted with nostalgia.
Right.
And so when they were kids, they thought all those things were perfect and amazing, and they can't see past the nostalgia of it to see that maybe it was a little more flawed than they thought.
Yeah. Kylo and Rey are there with Snoke, and they're talking and stuff, and Kylo ends up using the Force to stab the lightsaber through Snoke, killing him. And then there's this epic battle between... It's got to be the best lightsaber fight in all of Star Wars. It's so good between Kylo, Rey, and these guards. And my favorite thing in the whole world is all of these videos where people put it to different music. It's so funny to me. I love it. And I'm like obsessed with it. And anyway, so that is awesome. Jeremy, do you like that as much as I did? Did you think that was cool?
So I actually do really enjoy the scene. I don't. It's not. So yes, it's a lightsaber battle, but the only downside I have is the lightsabers were only on one side of the battle.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, if it had been like if the guards had lightsabers, then it would put it over the top for me. But I just didn't feel like I don't know. But it was spectacularly shot. I really enjoyed just good choreographing too, and just it didn't feel like a lot of times in the prequels it felt too choreographed and too dance like, and
Yes.
this didn't ever get there. It really felt real and gritty, and you had like a lot of different unique ways to die, and some unique play between Kylo and Rey to work together, and I did really enjoy the scene. It was a really great scene.
So my favorite one of my favorite moments in the movie is the moment that Kylo Ren kills Snoke. I just thought that was so beautifully done. Like, I cheered, and I was the only person in this packed theater that cheered because I'm crazy, apparently.
I thought it was
the
really
crazy
cool
lady
too.
cheering by herself in the theater.
I was surprised, genuinely surprised. It took me off guard.
Yeah, I think that's another. I think it's symbolic of kind of what Rian Johnson did to what, like after Force Awakens, everybody's been it left so many questions. Everybody's been like trying to find answers for 2 years. Like, oh, what's this theory, and who's Snoke, and what's all this, and what's Rey what does Luke do is when Rey hands him the lightsaber, and he just kind of takes everything that you've been thinking about and made it so nobody was right. And that, I think that's what's got everybody pissed off is like, who's Snoke? Oh, it's going to be this guy and this guy and this guy. Oh, he's dead. So it doesn't matter. And
well, and when you think about it, in the original movies, the only reason we know so much about the Emperor is because of the prequels now. But if you think about it as those original 3 movies, he was just kind of a sniveling bad guy, powerful bad guy. We didn't really know a whole lot about
the stupid looking guards.
Which ones did you didn't like?
The
red ones?
They looked so stupid. They looked like they were out of like the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie.
Yeah. I liked those rope things though. Those are kind of cool.
Rope things.
They had it was like a rope lightsaber that they were fighting.
Those were kind of cool. Yeah.
That was cool.
They had some interesting weapons and stuff. It was just their costumes, and it made no sense. Like, why wouldn't there just be stormtroopers in there? Why does he have special, stupidly dressed guards?
Yeah, I could see.
I don't get that.
I guess they just really wanted to add that red,
Apparently.
Apparently. You end up having on this salt planet, you have Rey. Rey ended up joining them with the Falcon. You have the rest of the sort of crew. You have Leia there, and that's when we end up seeing. And there's these weird crystal dogs. Did you like those dogs?
The kids loved those things. Yeah. I didn't care one way or the other. I liked them. I think I liked them on first viewing.
Did you like the porgs?
Oh yeah, so I like the porgs, and I liked them even more when I found out why they're there. I guess the island had a lot of indigenous birds, and I can't remember which one. But,
kiwi birds.
Yeah, and they actually had to find some way to cover up all the birds out of the filming, and so they created the porg.
Cool.
I disliked the porgs until I found that out. I was like, these are stupid. There's no reason for them to be here. But then when I found that out, I was like, okay, I'm more okay with them now.
They were cute. They weren't overused for me, so I was okay. I was okay with it. And yeah, the crystal dogs were sort of weird to me, but it was fine. It was not a big problem. And I mean, I like sort of the creature designs of Star Wars. It's always fun. And anyway,
It's
yeah,
a good way. It's a good way to draw kids in too, without making Jar Jar Binks.
right. Yeah. And you do have the scene, like you were mentioned, with Finn charging the AT-ATs and then Rose stopping him. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was fine. I kind of felt a little bit like Finn had gotten most of that sort of running away, scary, sort of the coward side of him kind of out in Force Awakens. I was sort of surprised. It seemed like he was kind of reverted back to where he had been in Force Awakens in this movie a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'd go yes and no. Yes, he was trying to go for the escape pod, but he was going to try to find Rey, and so I guess to me it was different. Like he's trying to save. It's almost like what Rose was trying to do. He's just trying to save Rey and get her out of danger. Doesn't know where she is, but he knows that this fight it's just going to end up killing everybody. So it's like he's sort of learned a bit from the first movie. But they kind of treated it like he hadn't learned anything, and I didn't care for that.
I noticed that too.
Yeah. So Luke shows up, and he and Kylo have this face off, and we find out that he is this hologram thing, and I don't know. I didn't love it. It wasn't my favorite. I just think it would have been really epic to have had Luke there. Luke, this final battle between him and Kylo, and really like making this sacrifice for the rebellion and really inspiring others. And I kind of felt like I wish they had given Leia the ending that Luke got. This peaceful, quiet, and of course they didn't know, that Carrie Fisher was going to pass away, of course. But there was a side of me that was sort of wished there was some way that could have happened and we could have done that. And I would have, I don't know. That's it. I just feel like, what are they going to do? Because we know that she's not in the next one. There's no filming for the next one with her. And so it's just going to be in the crawl, I guess, which will be very anticlimactic and kind of.
I agree.
Yeah.
I know that obviously they couldn't have predicted that she was going to die. But didn't she die in time? I mean, it seems like they could have done something with it in post.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
what could have killed her, and I would have. I was waiting for that almost, like,
because you want to be able to say goodbye to your princess. It's Princess Leia. Like, I don't know. I feel like they could have at least had like a funeral fire, like they did with Qui-Gon, or something to like. I don't know, just something like what they did with Luke. Just sort of floating off like that. Like, I feel like I could have been okay with that CGI.
Even if they had just taken out her, like, how easy would it have been to have just taken out her, like, pod thingy? That would have been too early in the movie, I guess, but something like that where it's like, okay, well, you can blow something up that we know she's there,
right?
Just
and
blow it up,
I don't know.
It's tough.
If there's any director I trust, it's J.J. Abrams, and he'll find a way to do it right.
I hope so.
And if it ends up in the opening crawl, it just does. But I feel like he'll probably find a better way to do it than that.
I hope so, because it's sort of like in the 7th Fast and the Furious movie, like, because Paul Walker passed away in the middle of filming that, and they were able to, through using doubles and I don't know, all different stuff that the tools that they created this just lovely like moment where he just sort of waves goodbye to everybody, and it's just this great sweet moment. And I just kind of wish that there had been something like that for if they had been able. And so hopefully they'll find some way, whether it's like a funeral fire or something at the beginning of the next one to kind of say goodbye. But I don't know. I just think it would have been really epic for Luke to have gone out as the hero martyr character that's going to inspire the rebellion, and but then again, maybe that truly does make Kylo Ren irredeemable if he's just killed Luke and Han Solo. I don't know.
I don't know. See, I think Luke did go out that way though.
I felt that way too. I don't.
Even though he wasn't, struck down in front of him, I think that was the point. Is had if he'd gone out there, I believe Kylo would have killed him. And yes, you could have kind of you relive the Obi-Wan from A New Hope, but that's not what the galaxy needed. They really needed, and you see that in the kids at the end, where they're recreating this scene with Luke, and when Luke just kind of offhand says this to Rey in training, is like, what do you want me to do? Like, take on the Empire with my little laser sword? And that's exactly the scene that we got. And he had that realization at some point, like, this is a way that I can do this. And the Jedi, this legend of the Jedi can live on, and they can see that one Jedi can stand and hold back an entire army, this entire empire. And it cost him his life. And that's where I feel like it really did. He did the sacrifice.
But he wasn't really there. Like, one guy can't stand up to him because he wasn't really there. Like, that's my struggle. Like,
yeah, I just have to. I actually really like the way that went down. I love that the way they did that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really liked it too. I thought it was a really awesome twist.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you could say, well, yeah, he wasn't really there, but what he did still had a real impact on both the Empire and on him.
Interesting.
One of the, kind of a big thing he had to learn, and he kind of learned that through this, is as he's talking to Rey, and Rey is talking about this legend of Luke Skywalker, and he's making fun of it, like, yeah, I'm going to go out there with my laser sword, and everybody's going to bow down, and I'm going to win, and it's like, he's kind of tossing that aside, like, but then he kind of comes to the realization that, yeah, this, the Force is bigger than me, and it's not about me. And I think that's the biggest thing Luke's had to figure out since he was a teenager, is like, it's not about you. It's about the Force, and it's way bigger than anybody. And if you can just, find what the Force, what's the will of the Force, and what's a way that you can, save this situation there. And that's the biggest thing. He saves the rebellion. He stands up to the Empire in an epic way. And in the same, breath, he's making Kylo look like an absolute fool. And I love that.
And he did need to redeem himself for the boneheaded move, standing over Kylo with his lightsaber like an idiot.
Yeah, agreed there. Yeah, he did.
But I feel like this really did redeem his character in this movie.
And he says you were wrong on all of your points. Like, the Resistance is not over. The Jedi are I'm not the last Jedi. And then as soon as he says that, it immediately pans to Rey. So,
Lifting rocks.
Yes, lifting rocks.
I liked that part. That was funny.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and then you see Rey with Rey and all of the remaining Resistance on the Millennium Falcon, heading to find the other rebels.
And how about that the entire Resistance fits on that one ship?
Crazy.
And it's not a big ship.
Right.
Before we move on,
please.
I want to talk about actually my least favorite part of the movie.
Okay.
Is actually the whole plot of you have Snoke's ship, and their whole Empire fleet is slowly following the Republic cruiser until it runs out of gas.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, oh well, there's nothing we can do because they're faster than us, and our short range fighters can't stay close enough, so we're just gonna follow until they run out of gas. I'm like, you still have hyper speed. Like, you can go to hyperspace, land in front of them, blow them up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
like how does why are we just playing this game and letting it draw out? Like, you have this entire fleet, have half of it go in front of them, half stay behind. Like, there are a million ways that they could just end this at any moment, and they just it just doesn't seem real to me that they would just follow this plan.
And they try to like fudge that in the fact that like General Hux is like completely incompetent, but it wasn't quite enough. I agree with you.
I mean, yes, he is, but he's not that incompetent. I mean, he knows how to blow things up. That's
yeah, that's a fair point for sure.
I just hated that. But I will say, on the other side, I loved the Holdo sacrifice, and the jump to light speed into their ship. Like, and people, online are like, well, why didn't they see this coming? Like, nobody's ever done this before. Why hasn't anybody done this before? And some of the speculation is it's a known thing, but it's kind of taboo. Like, nobody does it. It's just not done. And so even in the military, like, they're not preparing for that because nobody does that. Not really.
I really liked that too. I thought it was pretty epic. You know what? I wish it was Leia.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I agree with you.
And I think had they known that Carrie Fisher was going to die ahead of time, I think they would have rewritten that part at least, and had her be the one.
Yeah,
that would be an epic way to go out.
Yeah, because I think their thought was basically like Han Solo will die in the first one, Luke will die in the second one, Leia will die in the third one, and obviously that didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah,
should have considered the health status of all their actors.
Yeah,
everybody get a physical. We need a potential life expectancy for each of you.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised that they didn't really introduce a lot of new like they did have like a new droid, like at least like in Rogue One they had a new droid. I guess they had the black BB-8.
Yeah, the black BB that fine, I guess.
Yeah,
I didn't need a new droid in this one. I like BB-8. He carries it.
He was so cute. And C-3PO got a bit of time, more than in the last two. So, all right, how do you guys feel about the Han Solo movie? Are you excited, not excited? What are your thoughts?
I'm pretty neutral on it.
I gotta wait and see. For me, it's a wait and see. If the actor can, and I say the actor because I have literally not looked at anything about the movie yet. I'm waiting to see this new trailer. It's supposed to drop this week, and but it's really going to come down to, can he capture kind of that young Harrison Ford swagger and style, and that's what's going to sell it for me.
If they can find someone who does for Solo what Chris Pine does for Kirk, I'll love it.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks so much for joining and talking about this and this movie. And where can people find you?
So you can find me at Jeremy_kid on Twitter.
And you can find me at Abby_Twid. Abby_kid on Twitter.
Nice. Awesome. I'll have that all in the description section. Definitely check out them on Twitter. And you can find me at Smiley LDS Girl on Twitter. and Rachel's reviews on iTunes and YouTube. So check that all out and let us know your thoughts about all the different things that we talked about in the comment section, please. And we will look forward to the discussion. So we will talk to you all again soon.